Okay. Going to call the City Council and the successor agency to the redevelopment agency to order. Date's June 9th. Please note that all council members are present. And Councilmember Lucio is going to lead us in the flag salute, so if you'd please stand.
Please put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay. First thing on our agenda is public communication. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 1, which is our study session. This is an overview of our development impact fee nexus study update. I'd like to call on our contracts and DIF administrator, Sylvia Ramos, and our Wildan Financial Services consultant, Mr. Carlos Villarreal.
Why isn't it working? Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Before you this evening is an overview of the Development Impact Fee Nexus Study Update. Over the past 12 months, staff has worked closely with Wildan Financial Services to update the city's DIF program to confirm that fees align with current infrastructure needs, future growth, and facilities costs. The purpose of today's study session is to cover several key elements, including the legal framework, methodology, and fee comparisons. Staff is requesting that the City Council provide input on the updated Nexus study prior to releasing the public review draft to the developers and stakeholders. Following tonight's presentation, staff's next step will be to formally release the public review draft and begin the required 30-day public review period. During that time, staff will work with developers and stakeholders to address any questions or concerns and incorporate any necessary changes. Staff will return back to the City Council on July 21st, 2026 for the public hearing to consider adoption of the updated Nexus study and associated amendments to Chapters 3.40, 3.45 of the Municipal Code relating to the development impact fees, as well as Chapter 18 pertaining to the park fees. Before our consultant, Carlos Villarreal, presents the details of the updated DIF program, I would like to provide some background information and highlight key changes reflected in the update. Stop.
Is there another slide changer?
Oh, thank you.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. Okay. One of the major changes to this update is the shift from a per unit residential fee to a square footage based fee structure. Carlos will walk through the details. It should be noted that staff worked closely with Lewis Management Corp., the city's master developer, and reviewed both Lewis and non-Lewis developments to establish average home sizes. This allowed us to compare the current fee structure to the proposed methodology and ensure the transition is equitable and data-driven. Also, an alternative storm drain DIF methodology is also proposed. While the primary fee is based on building square footage, certain developments may be charged based on impervious square feet. This applies to projects with relatively low building square footage but significant stormwater runoff impacts. Moving on to the citywide DIF program. As you may know, the general city area is largely built out with limited vacant land remaining for large-scale development. Future growth is expected to occur primarily through infill development, redevelopment, accessory dwelling units, lot splits, and other smaller scale projects. The city utilized and incorporated the water and sewer master plans completed in 2022. Because DIF funds may only be used for growth-related improvements, only 3 projects were eligible to be included in the update that we're bringing to you today. It should also be noted that the master plan accounts for future growth within the sphere of influence also. Projects serving those areas cannot be included in the DIF program until they are annexed into the city. Through the annual update studies moving forward, The city will continue to look at the master plans and incorporate projects as appropriate when they are attributable to future development and eligible for inclusion in the DIF program. Please note that the storm drain DIF program list remains largely unchanged from the prior study. The primary update consists of construction cost escalations applied to the existing projects only. The city is actually currently working on updating the 2004 storm drain master plan and anticipates completing the 2027 update at the end of next year. Any growth-related capital improvements identified through that effort will be evaluated and included in next year's annual report. And lastly, for the citywide program, now that the city has taken over Euclid Avenue, we've included the ultimate configuration of roadway in the DIF program. This means that future improvements aligned with accommodating growth are planned, and the growth-related share of those improvements is funded through the DIF program. As growth occurs, those planned upgrades will help ensure Euclid can handle future demand. Next on the list is the park fee program. The park fees are typically not included as part of the Nexus study. However, last year when we came to council for the annual update, the costs for the park fee went up 80%. We had some feedback from the BIA and they had concerns, so the city council agreed and approved, I believe, a 12% increase. And staff recommended to the city council that we would come back this year and include the park fees as part of the Nexus study update to ensure that our fees are in line with what's being charged. So staff identified that we're still calculating the fees using the land acquisition component. However, the Title 18 in the Chino Municipal Code has that the construction cost per acre is actually calculated off the land acquisition. So if the land appraisal in the citywide program is less than the preserve, the fee is lower. It's not really equitable. So it costs the same to build a park in the preserve as it does in the citywide. So we moved away from that methodology as far as the construction cost per acre, and we did an analysis of local jurisdictions and agencies to see what the actual updated cost for park projects was, and then we averaged it out. So we're utilizing 1.16 per acre. So at least we're collecting enough to cover costs for future park expansion. And also the park fees, there's two components. The fee is the same for the Mitigation Fee Act park fee and also the Quimby fee. So the Quimby fee are for subdivisions. So when we're collecting those fees, they actually are more flexible, where we could utilize them for replacement, rehab, stuff like that, where the fees collected under the Mitigation Fee Act are more restrictive and only can be utilized for new park projects and expansion. And Carlos will highlight more on that too. Lastly on this slide, we have the public use facilities fee. The public use facilities fee is being postponed till September. We're still waiting on additional information, and staff intends to return to the city council in September 2026 with a separate analysis so we can get that feedback on the agenda. As you may already know, staff has agendized a few items when it comes to the reconciliation and true-up of the DIF credits and construction reimbursement agreements. The majority of those agreements are with Lewis Management Corporation. Currently, the water and streets reconciliations have been approved. We have the storm drain on the agenda for next week, and then there'll be subsequent true-ups coming your way early July. So the purpose of that, it was very intensive. We had to go back, and not even just with Lewis agreements, but with all development agreements that we had construction and credits assigned to other developers. We had to go up and true up everything. Everything that was committed and paid for and just closed out, those projects were removed from the DIF. The only thing remaining now are projects that still need to be funded or constructed or haven't been closed out. And then we're also carrying over any balance that we owe to the developers. So I have a table in the next slide that'll just show you what's being brought forward to be put into the new update. To complement the DIF program also, we hired Proactive Engineering. They're very familiar with the projects in the preserve. That's our primary development activity going on in the city. They prepared updated costs for everything So everything's trued up to what it should cost to date. Also, the Atlas maps are very helpful, which I'll go through very quickly after this, to show you that what's constructed, what's proposed, what hasn't been accepted. So it's very clear to developers, to staff, to anybody who's referencing these items. And then lastly, on this slide, we have the congestion management plan fee. This fee is in the preserve. It's only charged to the preserve, but it's for projects that are outside the city's jurisdiction. So there's several projects in there that are not very well defined or obsolete or just not even relevant today. So after talking to the city attorney and our consultant and staff, moving forward, because projects, when they come in through entitlements, they're mitigating their impacts to other jurisdictions through their traffic impact analysis. If there's any money owed for projects outside the city's jurisdiction, they're paying the cities directly. So there's no reason to collect this fee anymore. However, this standalone fee is actually going away in our Nexus study because it's not typical to charge a fee like this. But the city's going to retain the fund balance that we have collected, and we've identified a project that would be eligible for the utilization of this fund balance, and we're thinking it's going to go towards the 71 interchange portion of the Pine Avenue Bridge project. So we have a consultant right now doing the Nexus analysis to make sure that the monies that are going to be put towards that have a direct tie to future and past development in the preserve. So just real quickly, this is the table showing the remaining balances of the true-up of all the construction credit reimbursement agreements that the city has approved, implemented. The first column just shows all the validated cost through these multiple agreements. The second column shows the credit reimbursements issued to developers. And then the third column represents what is left that remains that we still need to essentially pay the developers back with. So you'll see in the project listing that there's a project at the very bottom of the list that shows these balances in these categories.
Good Lord.
So real quickly, these are the Atlas maps that I referenced. They're very straightforward. These are going to be updated every year as projects are being closed out. This is all the backbone infrastructure. It's just an illustration of all the projects that are included in our DIF program. We have one for our street DIF. We have storm drain. This is for the preserve. Our water diff, our recycled water, and our sewer diff. So now I'm going to hand it over to Carlos so he can go on with the methodology and the fee calculations.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to go through some of the framework that we think of when we're thinking about impact fees. I'll go over some of the requirements from AB 602, which is a piece of legislation that has gone into effect since the city last updated their fees. I'll go through our methodology and how we allocate costs. And then finally, I will present the maximum justified fee schedules in the draft, and then we'll compare those to both the city's current impact fees, but also to some of your neighbors. And just so we're all on the same page, we'll start off with some really basic impact fee 101. Impact fees are a one-time charge, typically imposed at the building permit stage, although for most residential projects, they are now charged at certificate of occupancy. They're imposed on all projects within a defined area. In this case, the city has a few varieties. There are some fees that are charged uniformly citywide when a service is provided uniformly citywide. And then there are, of course, fees that vary by the area, so the general city area versus the preserve, that reflect the increased infrastructure needs in the preserve. But the key to all of this is that impact fees fund the facilities that are needed to serve new development, not ongoing costs, not maintenance, not rehab. It's really just the facilities or the capital assets that are needed to serve growth, and our study needs to demonstrate that relationship between new development and the facilities that are needed to serve it. So why would a city charge impact fees? Well, the short answer is we want growth to pay its own way. If you do not mitigate for impacts, then your service levels may decrease. For example, your parks might get more crowded or there might be more congestion. So the impact fees are a funding source that allows developers to sort of mitigate these external costs, and they free up your general fund revenue and other general purpose revenues to be used for ongoing services and other needs. In California, it's the Mitigation Fee Act that lays out how a local agency would calculate and implement an impact fee. Several key findings need to be made in any Nexus study. First, we need to demonstrate that new development creates the need for facilities. We need to show that new development will benefit from the use of the fee revenue. And we need to show that the fees are roughly proportional to new development share of facility cost. There's also a couple of housekeeping items. We need to document the purpose of the fee and how the city intends to use the fee revenue. I mentioned AB 602 a little bit earlier on. This went into effect, I believe, in 2022, but several jurisdictions or many jurisdictions haven't updated their fees since then, so some of these requirements are now just coming into play. The first box there, you see there are some transparency and disclosure items. Most cities already comply with these, but now it's official that you need to make your impact fee schedule, nexus studies, and annual and 5-year reporting easily available online. One big change, and Sylvia already alluded to this, is that there's a 30-day public notice period before a jurisdiction can consider the adoption of a nexus study at a public hearing. So it's a little bit more lead time to allow for public review there. And then in terms of technical changes, there's a strong suggestion that residential fees be calculated per square foot. Prior to AB 602, the majority of residential fees were calculated as a flat rate per dwelling unit by type of dwelling unit. So this is a pretty big change in terms of the technical approach. But of course, there are incentives. If you build a smaller unit, you would pay lower fees than if it was just a flat rate. A large jurisdiction needs to include a capital improvement plan as part of the nexus study. And in this case, large jurisdictions are defined as cities within a county that have more than 250,000 residents. So this would apply to you. The nexus study needs to identify the level of service, and we also need to look back at the original assumptions or the prior assumptions used to calculate the fee if the fees are increasing. This next slide lays out our basic methodology. We start by estimating demand for facilities, and we think about demand coming from people, so people that live and work in the city. We've done this both for the overall city, including the general city area plus the preserve, and you'll also see in the report there's a table identifying these estimates separately for the general city and the preserve for those fees that have different service areas. We can then identify facility standards. The common example here would be park acres per 1,000 residents, but this concept can be applied to other types of facilities as well. Then, using those facility standards, but also any other engineering that the city has done, so water and sewer master plan, for example, we can identify the facilities that are needed to serve the city out into the future, and then we can allocate a share of those facilities to accommodate growth. So in some cases, new development can fully fund all of the costs. In other cases, the facilities might also be benefiting existing development and needed to correct existing deficiencies. So that share that's benefiting existing development or mitigating existing deficiencies cannot be funded by the impact fees. So in the next step, we identify the share that has to come from other sources as opposed to the share that can be funded by the fees. And then finally, we take the costs that have been allocated to new development and allocate those per unit of growth. In this case, all the fees are expressed per square foot for both residential and non-residential, with the exception of the fees for hotel rooms. So commercial lodging is charged at a flat rate per room. So we mentioned the different service areas. This next slide here just lays out all the different fees included in the program update. The one exception there is public use facilities, which we'll be bringing back at a later date once we've received a little bit more information. But you can see for water, sewer, storm, and circulation and parks, the fees vary by the service area, so the general city versus the preserve. The miscellaneous residential amenities fees is only charged in the preserve, and it's not charged in the general city area. And then fire, law enforcement, and general facilities are charged uniformly citywide. So just to lay out some overarching assumptions here, this slide here lays out the growth projections assumed in the study. The build-out figure comes from your general plan update EIR. We also took a look at the specific plan, the preserve specific plan. And as you can see, there's almost 9,000 new jobs, over 10,000 new dwelling units, and approaching 36,000 new residents citywide between now and build-out, which is pegged for approximately 2045. Consequently, with this increase in demand for facilities, the city needs to provide services, and the facilities needed to house those services, and that's sort of the relationship between growth and the impact fees. So we mentioned facility standards or cost allocation a little bit earlier. There are 3 different approaches that are used in the study depending on the facility category, and I'll give you sort of an overview of how they work. The first approach is the existing inventory approach, and the common example here is parks. So we can quantify the existing parks serving the city, we can quantify existing demand, so residents, and calculate park acres per 1,000 residents to identify your existing level of service. And then we know how much it costs to acquire and build an acre of parks, for example, so we can use all of those inputs to set the fee so that new development contributes to parks at your existing service standard. Under the planned facilities approach, here's what we might use this approach if we have a master plan that identifies specific facilities and the share of those facilities that are needed to accommodate growth. In that case, we can add up the costs that are needed to accommodate growth and divide it by the increase in demand. An example here might be your sewer fee, where we can identify particular sewer lines that are needed to serve new development, and we know the increase in flow, in sewer flow that can be accommodated by those facilities. So we take the cost divided by the increase in flow and get a cost per gallon per day of flow, which drives the fee calculation. Now the third approach, the system standard, is sort of a combination of the first two. This is appropriate when there are facilities that are going to serve both existing and new development, and it's sort of difficult to suss out what share of the facility is serving who. This might be applicable for, say, fire facilities, right? You'll build a new fire station, but that new station is going to respond to calls from both existing and new residents, and your existing stations will also provide mutual aid and respond to calls from both existing and new folks as well. So in this case, we take a look at the existing facilities that are currently providing service, identify their replacement cost, add the cost of the future planned facilities that are needed to serve the city as well, and identify the total value of the system at the planning horizon. We can then compare that to demand at the planning horizon, so in this case 2045, divide the cost of those facilities by your service population in 2045 and get a cost per person that drives the fee calculation. Under this approach, new development can pay their fair share of the identified facilities, but we'll have to identify a share that's needed to serve existing development because the system serves existing development as well. This next slide lays out the approaches that we used in the study. We used the existing level of service approach for parks. We used that system standard approach for fire suppression, general city facilities, and miscellaneous residential amenities in the preserve, and then a planned facilities approach largely driven by the city's master planning efforts for water, sewer, storm drain, circulation, and law enforcement. This next slide here just gives a high-level look at the types of facilities and improvements that are contemplated in the study. Of course, the Nexus study has a detailed list for every facility category. So for parks, the idea is that the park fees would maintain a 3-acre standard. The analysis shows that the city has in excess of 3 acres today in both the general city and in the preserve. For water facilities, we're contemplating recycled water lines and water mains and other related facilities. Same for sewer, so sewer mains and upsizing of facilities to accommodate development. For general city facilities, the city's contemplating a pretty large public works services center, so a new corporation yard. And then for traffic, the project list include capacity expanding, signalization and backbone streets needed to serve the increase in demand. For the public use facilities fee that we'll be bringing back, and again isn't included in this draft, there is a large, significant community center at the preserve. And then finally, for the storm drain fees, like Sylvia mentioned, we are funding the storm drain facilities identified in the prior master plan. Of course, as the city updates its storm drain master plan, we intend to bring back an update to the general city facilities fee at some point in the future. So, what does this all boil down to? This is our maximum justified fee schedule here for the general city, and I'll walk you through it. So, due to AB 602, the fees will be implemented per square foot for single family and multifamily, but it's kind of hard to judge what a fee per square foot looks like when you've been charging your fees per dwelling unit. So, the second 2 rows there, I showed what the fees would be for the average size dwelling unit. And like Sylvia mentioned, we had information from the city's development partners to identify the average square footage of a single family and a multifamily unit based on future projects going forward. So the average sized figures are listed there in the footnote, but about 3,300 square feet for single family and 1,400 square feet for multifamily. So using those assumptions, we could convert the residential fees per square foot into what it might look like if you're building that average sized unit in town. Again, this is the fee schedule here for the general city. I think the average size unit is helpful. So for a single family unit, the fee would be a little less than $43,000. And for a multifamily unit, the total fee across all the categories would be a little less than $30,000. This next slide here shows the maximum justified fee schedule for the preserve. Of course, the residential amenities fee, or miscellaneous residential amenities fee, I should say, is not charged in the general city, so that would be one difference here. And then for circulation, storm, water, sewer, and parks, the fees are slightly different, or a little bit higher than the fees in the general city. And again, that's reflecting the infrastructure needed to support the new growth area out in the preserve. And again, for the purpose of comparison, you can see the maximum justified fees here across these facility categories are just shy of $64,000 for your average sized unit for single family and $44,000 roughly for that multifamily unit. But now I'll give you, before I get to the fee comparison, let me show you sort of the summary of everything. So this next slide here lays out the net project cost, and that would be net of your existing fund balances. So we wanted to make sure that we took into account the funding that the city has on hand. You sum it up across all the fee programs, and this includes the summary for both the general city and the preserve, so all the numbers are included here. It's a total project cost of about $962 million. Of that, the fees, if implemented at the maximum justified levels, would generate about $697 million roughly between now and 2045, and that would leave about $265 million to be funded by other sources. I would just note that of that additional funding required, there are a few sort of big ticket projects that make up the majority of that. For storm drainage, there's an agreement with the developers where they're paying about $6 million for an improvement, and it's $70 million or so. So that there's a big difference there between the project cost and what the developers are obligated to pay. And then I'll have Sylvia help me remember there's a major circulation system improvement that has a large unfunded share.
So the majority of the unfunded share is line I, because the costs have grown exponentially, and also the Pine Avenue connector.
Yep.
And then we also have the proposed city yard that's included in there. So that's pretty much the unfunded balance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the city yard in general city facilities, that nearly $32 million, that's existing development share of the proposed city yard. And with that, I'll share a fee comparison that we put together here. And just to walk you through this slide, we calculated the fees for one single family unit of 3,320 square feet. Some cities are still charging at a flat rate per unit, so we just use the fees per unit there, and then other cities are charging per square foot, so that's why I'm kind of laying out all those assumptions there. You can see the city's current fees are in the yellow bars, so for both the general city and the preserve, and then the green bars represent the draft fees at the maximum justified rates. You'll also see that for some other cities, for example, Rancho Cucamonga has a low and a high. That's because they charge their fees in zones similar to how you do. So depending on where you're building in the city, you might pay one of two or maybe multiple different fee schedules. I believe theirs might be driven by a different storm drain fee. And the City of Ontario is also sort of analogous to your situation. They have a general city fee and a fee in their growth area. So that's why you have two different columns for the City of Ontario. So anyway, this just sort of lays out how the city compares in both the current and draft fees. This next slide here, rather than just compare a single multifamily unit, we took a look at sort of a prototypical development of 20 units at the 1,400 square feet per unit. So that's where we got the 2,800 square feet. And I think, all the comparisons will show a similar story where the city's fees are on the upper end of the range of the comparisons. Yeah, again, we're showing the current and draft fees across the board here. Another comparison here, this is for a 10,000 square foot sort of generic retail prototype. And I would say all the comments I made earlier apply to this comparison as well. This next slide here shows the comparison for a 50,000 square foot office building. And I was also just reminded that the City of Ontario is currently updating their fees as well. So can't say for certain, but it's likely their fees will be increasing at some point in the next year or so.
You don't think it'll be going down?
And then the final comparison here is for a 100,000 square foot, sort of a generic industrial prototype. So I'll hand it back to Sylvia to discuss the next steps.
Sure. So next steps is to receive city council feedback, to incorporate any suggestions, recommendations before we send out the draft copy to the industry and the developers. We can revise the study based on anything that comes back to us. Once we distribute the information, again, we tentatively have it scheduled to come back to City Council on the 21st to introduce the ordinances, which is for the Title 18, which is the park and recreational land, and also chapters 3.40 and 3.45 for the development impact fees, and conduct the public hearing. Then we have to wait until September 1st to bring back the adoption and the second reading, and then fees will go into effect about 60 days later, which would be November 1st. That concludes our report. I'd be happy, and Carlos would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. I think before I ask if there's any public comment, I think I'll open it up for council questions first. Chris, do you have any questions you would like to ask?
No questions right now, Mayor. Thank you.
Mark, do you have any questions?
Yeah. So we look at the 260 something or $1 million shortfall that we're going to have at the end of build out. Now, the majority of that is because of the Pine Avenue connector, the Euclid connector, and Line I. Is that what you said?
That's correct. So,
What's the total number?
Oh, gosh.
Just on those three projects.
So line I is about a $71.7 million deficit.
Okay.
And then Pine Avenue, let's see here, give me one moment. Pine Avenue is a $132.5 million project, only 16 million of which can be funded by the fees. So what's that? 116 roughly million unfunded. And then the general city facilities, I believe that was about 31 million for the Public Works Center.
So we're looking at 60-something million shortfall. So that's not even counting Euclid, right? That's just counting Pine Avenue? Or is that both Pine Avenue and
No,
Euclid?
right, I was just citing Pine Avenue there.
So what's Euclid?
actually, Euclid is programmed in both. So currently, the city, well, we utilize trip generation data, and we had all of the costs broken down into segments for Euclid. So about 24% is programmed into the preserve, and the remaining is programmed into the citywide, but it's looking like it's fully funded for the Euclid. So the 18 million that we're getting with the relinquishment will go towards existing deficiencies, and the projects that are programmed into the diff now for Euclid will be for expansion of circulation projects. So it's full ultimate improvements.
So, Sylvia, does that include the bridge as well, or just Euclid from Pine North?
Yep, Pine North.
And actually, I'm going to revise what I said. The 132.5 million, that is the total allocated to other funding for Pine Avenue. The total project cost is 148.5 million.
And then I have a question. The congestion management fee, who pays that? Are you saying that other cities that?
No, so when the program started in the preserve, there was a traffic study that was incorporated into the fees, and it included projects outside the city's boundaries. So for example, there was a project in there for 3 traffic signals on Archibald, but it's not really well-defined, or projects in Riverside County. And the project's listing is pretty archaic and outdated, so Ultimately, now through entitlements, traffic mitigation for outside infrastructure is addressed through the traffic impact analysis. So if the developer is required to pay impacts in other cities, they just pay the cities directly. So pretty much that fee was us collecting it, and then we would have to broker the money to other jurisdictions as these projects were being built out.
So it wasn't like, let's say, for example, the city of Eastvale that causes a lot of congestion down Pine Avenue to the 71. So we're not charging Eastvale developers for the congestion that they're causing in our city.
No. It's for the development that's occurring in the city of Chino, which impacts outside jurisdictions. So we're redirecting the funds that have been collected, which is about $9 million, and we're going to put it towards a project that's outside the city boundary that has a direct tie and nexus to the preserve for past and future development.
So it's the opposite of that scenario. It's-
So why wouldn't we have charged other cities for the impact that they're making in our city?
It's just not typically done. To charge a fee in another jurisdiction, it's not common practice, and it would be difficult to implement. I'm not really familiar of another program that does that, to be honest.
Did Eastvale collect a fee for their congestion within our city or Ontario? Like if that's what we're doing?
Actually, well, this fee is it's not typical for,
Jesus.
oh yeah, okay. Go ahead, Jesus.
Good evening. Just from my own personal experience, I think other jurisdictions, they collect fees to handle improvements within their jurisdictions, that they don't collect monies that then they're going to broker to other agencies as far as addressing impacts that their developments might have in those other jurisdictions.
So why
that's-
would we spend $9 million in somebody else's jurisdiction?
Because the fee was actually collected for projects outside of the cities proper. So ultimately, we're looking to utilize that money because it's hard, like we're restricted to what we can spend it on. So we have to draw it back to and have a nexus in order to redirect it to another project. So logically, instead of paying for traffic signals in Corona or Eastvale and sending money, $13,000 for a traffic signal in Archibald, it made sense to reevaluate the projects that were listed. Are they still relevant today? What's relevant today is we need to, provide more transportation capacity, and that would actually have a tie back to the preserve and have a nexus.
Why wouldn't we use that for like Euclid or Pine?
You have to spend the fee revenue that you've collected for the purpose that it was collected. So it was collected for this congestion management program, and you have to spend it for that purpose.
Why wouldn't we use it on let's say, the Chino Hillside?
That's what we're using it for. So we're going to use it on the interchange, the 71 interchange portion, which is located within the city of Chino Hills.
I thought you said it was going to be on Archibald.
No, I apologize. So the projects that are in the existing DIF program that we collected the fee for consist of projects that are outside, like traffic signals on Archibald, in Eastvale, in Corona. So we evaluated those projects and it didn't make sense today for what we need. So what we're doing is we're redirecting the money and looking at something that's more feasible to fund instead of these kind of non-descriptive projects that aren't really well described. So ultimately, we want to utilize the money and redirect it to something that we could use it for, which would be something similar to the 71 interchange in Chino Hills.
So let's say, for example, if Chino Hills is supposed to pay a certain portion, is there any way that they pay that certain portion and we credit it on our side and then we use that money to credit it on their side? So it's...
I think that Hajan and her team has been working with Chino Hills to come up with a funding plan and then an agreement moving into the future when it comes to the Pine Avenue connector, the 71. It hasn't really been worked out. I have a feeling that the city of Chino will probably be more responsible for a lot of the funding, so this is another way for us to kind of leverage the funds that we have and put it towards this project. I don't know if Hajan wants to chime in a little bit.
While Hajan's coming up, I'm sure we don't know the origin of why we were charging that fee or how long it's been in our DIF program.
It's been in the DIF program for over 20 years. Like I like Carlos said, it's not typical. So over the years, when we were mitigating impacts with developers for outside agency projects, now we just have the developers pay directly instead of us collecting the fee and then brokering through to other cities. So it makes sense just to kind of clean up the diff to, have this fee just kind of go away, and then we redirect the money to a project that we could utilize it for because there is a nexus.
Do you have anything, Hadrian?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, we are working closely with City of Chino staff to finalize our design. So we are actually running concurrent with the actual engineering plans, projects plans and specifications, as well as running our environmental and traffic analysis. So all of those combined will help us identify what we need at the interchange. And definitely the funds that were collected for the traffic impact outside of the city boundary, that fund can be supplemented to construct the interchange. And that will be a good place to spend the money and also reduce congestion in that area. And that's a direct impact from the preserve development. And in terms of funding agreement, since we don't have a final plans and we're discussing about in the future whether we could work with some of our electeds on the state and federal level to advocate for substantial source of that funding. By the time we're done with the design, the approximate construction cost would be about $150 million. So that's something that is not a local agency can afford. So we're gonna definitely need some federal funding and some support for that. And we would have a better chance of securing that if we work with the agencies around us, including SBCTA and City of Chino Hills and Caltrans. Because this is not just a Pine Avenue for the purposes of serving the preserve community, but it is a corridor that serves Ontario and Eastvale and Norco, that area that going east and westbound. So we're definitely advocating that other agencies support our efforts to construct this by showing letter of support when we're ready to advocate on the federal level.
I have nothing else for now.
I would like to follow on with Mark's question about the congestion management plan. So you mentioned that $9 million that was collected for outside of our community, but now we're going to reallocate it to possibly the 71 interchange. You mentioned that developers now will pay other cities directly. Who calculates the amount that they pay? Who oversees that? Is that between the developer and the other cities, or is that something that we still have to be involved in?
No, we're not involved in it anymore. So through the traffic impact analysis that's required during the entitlement process, they determine how much in proportional cost for traffic signals or other traffic calming projects. So ultimately, in the past, we would actually invoice for those deposits for San Bernardino County, for Ontario, Eastvale, or adjacent cities. And then once we get those deposits in, they actually stay in our account, and then we have to pass them through. So instead of us being the broker, the developers are required to pay their fair share directly to those cities.
But
So
it's still our responsibility to do the calculation.
maybe Jesus can provide more information on the entitlement side. He's our expert.
Right, so it's done through the traffic study. So the developer's traffic engineer prepares the traffic study, and it determines what's the fair share that they have to contribute towards other jurisdiction improvements. And so I think what Sylvia is indicating is that we would still need to make sure that the developer is making those payments towards those other jurisdictions to fulfill the mitigation that the traffic study identifies.
So the developer does the study that determines how much they have to pay somebody else.
Correct.
We don't collect the money any longer, but now we're going to be responsible for overseeing to make sure they pay the other community?
Correct.
It doesn't
because-
make any sense. I mean, how do we know if they've paid it or not? And if they don't, what do we do about it?
So if I may chime in, generally when a developer comes in, we require them to do a traffic analysis. Our team peer reviews that analysis, or maybe uses an outside consultant to assist with that peer review. That analysis explains what the project in Chino and how it would impact surrounding jurisdictions. The way I understood the current process is that we would take that money and sort of be in the middle of trying to work with the other jurisdictions, which created, I think, a little bit of administrative complexity and burden. The developers are conditioned to provide those payments. So the conditions require them to demonstrate, yes, here's a check, I've sent it to the city of Eastvale, the city of Chino Hills, et cetera. So
they
we
would have to
verify
provide us with like a receipt that
Right.
they've done it?
something like that, right?
Yeah.
And
This is something that cities normally do not do, right?
cities normally do this, yes. They collect a fair share, they require a fair
I mean,
share.
if you look at the impacts that we've had in our areas as a result of the growth of Eastvale, I mean, we received no lights, we've received no improvement on any of the I think we had one lane in each direction heading down Pine Avenue. So, I mean, there was never anything that came to us as a result of
So
this.
that's when cities get involved and potentially question an entitlement. If Eastvale is proposing to develop a large project, you know, at the time, it doesn't sound like this happened.
So all
but
this
then-
time, we've been asleep and not paid attention to what Eastvale was doing and not asking them to reimburse us for impact?
Either they didn't craft the right analysis to demonstrate that their projects were creating impacts within Chino, in which case jurisdictions generally push back and say, you know, you're approving a project that's going to have all the impacts on our streets.
So we stayed asleep and didn't pay attention.
That was years before I was.
I mean,
think-
because even when we
I don't know,
close
but-
Pine Avenue or any of the streets, Eastvale immediately starts trying to contact us, asking us when we're gonna open our streets and everything, because they know that impacts their residents.
But I think that's a difficult impact to back up. I think one could ask themselves, like, once we broke through on Grand Avenue over into Diamond Bar, did Diamond Bar charge us any impact fee to go through that area? And then it just keeps, moving out. So I don't know how to track that. I don't know if it's proper for us to track it now. It just seems like, where does that impact? How do you put the appropriate trail on it when you really look at, like, how far that can reach out? It just seems to me how hard that would be.
Well, my point is, if our developers are required to identify an impact outside of our boundary, why aren't other developers required to do the same? Why are our developers punished if others are not?
The problem I have with that study, Mayor, and us discussing it right now, is it's prepared by the developer, right? And what developer is going to be wanting to add to an impact to a surrounding community, much less to our community?
Why do we require our developers to do it?
I don't know.
Well, from what I understand, we peer review. I don't know if it's internal or with a consultant, but so that they can't,
I mean,
Budget.
there's been cities that have pushed back on other cities with their proposed developments and saying
course.
that their developments are going to impact them in certain ways. So I'm assuming when they were building out, we probably should have also, at that point, voiced our concerns that it was going to impact us, and we just never did.
I think it depends on the transportation component. Like, nobody can deny that Pine Avenue is a main arterial supporter. So you're going to look at some of those things, or like how Grand Avenue has developed into support of transportation now. So I think knowing that, our staff has to do, a better job of paying attention to that. But that's really hard, in my opinion, to back that up. But to your point, Mayor, I don't understand why we would require our developers to do it. I think it's a good question. And do we have to do it? Why are we doing it? If you guys can't explain why we're doing it, I don't understand why we're doing it.
I guess question for.
Well, I mean, because, like, for example, we're building up Euclid and we're building up Pine Avenue, but we realize that it's going to be utilized by the residents of Ontario Ranch, but we're not requiring Ontario to provide us any money for that roadway that we're going to be developing. And if is that something that we should be looking to? That would be my question.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm James Edison from Wildan Financial Services. I can tell you most broadly, cities don't have any power to cause other cities to charge fees for impact fees. They do have sort of crude levers. I mean, cities do sometimes sue each other. They use CEQA for impacts. But what you're describing here is essentially cooperative. I mean, it's sort of a good neighbor policy, if you will. You have no lever to force anyone to do anything. And the fact that some cities are more cooperative than others, well, that's the world we're in. So I can't address past practices, but I can tell you that these kinds of arrangements do exist between cities, and they're entirely cooperative, except for sometimes there are lawsuits, CEQA, and the settlement of the CEQA lawsuit is some sort of arrangement like this, although it's unusual for it to be systematic. Usually it's over some particular improvement or some particular specific plan or some particular interchange that they're not paying their fair share of. It's usually around individual projects. To have a more general arrangement, I think for us is unusual to see, but certainly in the context of impact fees, you don't have any authority to cause another jurisdiction to charge an impact fee on your behalf. It's entirely voluntary. For some, for example, fire districts that cover multiple jurisdictions, it's common for the fire district to request the cities to collect impact fees on their behalf, but it's a request. You don't. So in answer to sort of the puzzle of this, it's entirely, to my knowledge, entirely voluntary. You've done it in order to cooperate with your surrounding jurisdictions.
Looking
if
at
I
our
may-
fees, they're so doggone high. If other communities are not being nice neighbors and helping us, I hate to be rude about it, but why in the world are we collecting or having our developers pay high? Because our fees are a lot higher than somebody else. Why are we doing that and passing money to another community if they're not reciprocating?
Not only that, but then once we collect it, we have to spend it in another city. I think that's
Well, we
also-
don't collect it. We're requiring the developer to pay for it
Right.
directly, but it's like,
And then to spend it in a different city when
Yeah.
we don't get the same thing.
plus our fees are already so high.
So maybe this is me stepping into city engineer's toes, so kick me under the table, hey, Jen, if you disagree. But the theory, as I normally understand it, is that cities will do this and analyze the traffic impacts that spill out into other jurisdictions because those could create stacking and impacts on our jurisdiction. So if, for example, a turn-in lane is needed in the city of Chino Hills so as not to create an impact on in our city, you want to assure that those improvements are done. I don't know if that's a fair statement.
I get it. It's just what bothers me is the fact that we're being the good neighbors, but it appears that our neighbors don't
not
give a
doing
rip
that.
about their impact for us. So it's like, wait a minute, this should be reciprocal.
And as I mentioned, I think was underscored by the comments from Wildan's representative, cities, when they feel like they're going to bear the bulk of the impact, and the other city is not providing some fair share payments, that's when you threaten legal action, a CEQA lawsuit, et cetera, and then it compels them to cooperate.
But I go back to like the mayor and Mark's original question. Okay, so this gentleman from Wilden just said we can collect the information and we can provide it next door. It is cooperative, but I mean, what authority do we have to make them pay it? Who's going to do it? Like, nobody's doing it, right? I mean,
I think the
like, why are we
question-
making them do it? And the question is, do we have to make the developer do that? If we don't have to make them do it, maybe we don't do it.
Yeah, I think that was a question I was going to ask our consultants and even Fred. I guess it's a past practice that I guess we don't have any history on. They think that it's been around for like at least 15, 20 years, and whoever started it. Since it's totally voluntary, do we have to keep collecting it? My understanding is that sometimes we have a hard time finding agencies to give the money to, because some of the agencies don't have a program like us, so they don't even have a mechanism to receive the money, because it's kind of like us giving money to somebody, but they don't even have a system in which to receive it and invest it back in.
So Hadrian, you're reading my mind right now. Like, even if we wanted to do it in a neighboring city, I was sitting here thinking, like, what if they don't have a fund that's equal to it to reciprocate to us? So they would have to dedicate either general fund money or maybe have another project that was aligned with ours. It just, to me, it just seems weird.
Yeah, so question is, can we stop
Yeah.
collecting that part?
Yeah, and as it is, we collected it like on the far east of the side of the city, and it's nice, but now we're pulling the convenient switcheroo to put it, over here. I mean, I don't mean that the wrong way, Sylvia, but it's like, okay, well, we can't use it over there, so let's put it over here. So I don't know.
And that's the whole purpose, so I just want to clarify. So we want to eliminate the fee, so we're not charging the developers moving forward?
So, I mean, we already have the highest fees before we increase the fees. So I would suggest that we eliminate that fee so that even if we do increase it slightly, maybe it's a wash.
Sure, so that's what we're actually proposing,
I
is
agree.
to eliminate the fee. We've collected 9 million in the fund balance, but we have to redirect the money to a project that has a direct nexus to the preserve, and we have to spend it on what we initially collected it for. So it was to mitigate impacts outside of the city's boundaries. So it makes sense because we are carrying the burden of the Pine Avenue connector and the costs associated. And as Hajan mentioned too, that we're going to be seeking federal funds and grants and whatnot. So it'd be a good opportunity to utilize that money towards a match or something of that sort. But moving forward, that was the whole intent, is just to remove it from the diff, stop collecting it moving forward. And then any traffic stuff is identified through entitlements and through the traffic studies and whatnot, and it's completely outside the diff. So that was our initial intent.
Unless you can create a diff that is going to go specifically to those projects because additional homes are going to impact that area. And instead of creating a diff that provides money to outside the city, make it specifically to fund those bridges that we need. I mean, if that's the case, then I would have no problem continuing to collect that diff from the developers as long as we had it earmarked specifically for those projects.
I think we already are. Anything else?
Not for now.
Curtis?
I think that,
Hey, Jim,
go ahead,
wanted to say
Adrian.
one more thing, Mayor. Yeah. And Mayor, I wanted to address your concerns about what the staff is doing when other development is happening around adjacent to the city. We do receive notices occasionally from City of Ontario, and they have some major developments going on, not too far from the city boundary. And we do thoroughly review those traffic reports to make sure that there's no adverse impact to us. And also, we also look at whether there's going to be truck traffic or additional trips generated that might be in conflict with what we are proposing. So it's not just what they're doing, but in cumulatively with what we are also planning in the region. So we are.
But we don't charge them. We just have to accommodate whatever they add to us.
Correct, but we could also provide comments saying that we might need a turn pocket here or there, or some kind of a type of improvement, and we could collaborate with them. So we are certainly looking at other developments and their traffic studies very closely.
Well, I know when it comes to storm drain, we're certainly taking an uneven hit on the water coming from Ontario, and we're having to face that burden.
Because of the historical flows, yeah.
Right.
That's right. That one is a California drainage law. There's not much we can do about that.
Oh, I know, it's just
Yeah.
unfair. Okay, thank you. Kurt?
I have several questions about the congestion management fee that have been more than answered now, and I just suggest we put a toll booth up down there on Pine Avenue. Help me.
Larry, I think it was Larry Walker that years ago thought we needed a toll booth on 71 Pine Avenue. Several. Can you imagine? Anything, Kurt? Any other
nothing
questions?
else.
Karen?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'll start with the low-hanging fruit. Early in your presentation, sir, you mentioned that there are some cities that charge the DIF fee connected to a certificate of occupancy. What is the pro and con of doing that? What's, obviously, we don't do ours. We charge ours up front, as you stated. What is the benefit of them waiting to charge it with the COO?
Oh, I think the benefit to the developer is they can hold on to they don't have to pay the fee
So
upfront.
their money- so it's a
yeah,
benefit to the
It helps their
developer?
timing, yes.
Okay.
But there are some state laws, and I don't recall them all off the top of my head, but there are some state laws that govern when that situation applies, when a developer is allowed to pay a certificate of occupancy as opposed to building permit.
Okay, my only question is because sometimes we've gotten people who get, not as much now with our staff because they do a much better job, but, 3/4 away into the project and they want a TOC, right, temporary occupancy permit, and we've gone back and forth with that, and I think our staff knows that we're not willing to do that under most circumstances now, except for under rare occasion. Can you go back to a slide about, just go back a few slides. No. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah, right here, I think, right here. So in speaking earlier with the city manager on this, and I brought it up to her on this project, like, I don't understand, not necessarily in a master planned area, but where we get into, like, when we have infill projects or maybe a warehouse or something that comes up in maybe a more senior area of the city where we have like a sidewalk nexus, like where that fits into, right? We have it for sewer, waters, but we've been time and time again, like a project will come up, like the most recent one that I can think of is like at Yorba and Schaefer, how we get a sidewalk nexus study into our development impact fee. I don't understand like what study it takes to get that nexus study into the cost associated with this, but time and time again, we'll have one of these projects come up and they'll say, well, we only want to do this, but we think the nexus is this, right? And that's also, I think, in addition to not requiring developers in the past, because we had a different perspective on it, I understand. But now when it comes to connectivity and different things, we're struggling with some of this stuff, as we move along. How do we get it in here, and is it appropriate for here, or what has to happen for us to understand that?
So there are some cities that charge a sidewalk linkage fee type fee. And if I'm understanding you correctly, you're talking about sort of filling in sidewalk gaps.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so in those situations, new development can pay their share, and the idea would be that these would provide connectivity on routes of citywide significance. So this wouldn't be something occurring on like a minor residential street, but maybe a collector or an arterial where you're kind of filling in those gaps.
So I'm going to tell you right now, I think that's something we need to look at, because every
Okay.
time it comes up in a project and how we make the modification to it, it's a big old, we've had to be with developers about connectivity of sidewalk and different things.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that's my first recommendation to the city manager that we also look at before we bring this back to council. The shortfall of money here is huge. I think the thing that's missing in this presentation for when it comes back to council, mostly for staff, is the actual amounts that we're projecting for these projects to be, from Line I to Pine to the connector, laying those out so that the public understands the capital outlay that this is going to cost, in addition to the funding sources that we intend to seek, right? Because this is a whole lot of money that we have a shortfall on. And maybe a strategy for us to start setting aside, a percentage of this money ongoing, because we know that these things aren't going to be built right overnight, but the accelerator in these projects and building them is going to be huge. So I would say between grants or how we intend the strategy, like the multitude of strategies available for us to fund these projects to the public so they can get their mind around, and us, how this is going to look in the future for each project, what we're projecting at the time. That connects me to the Community Facilities District, our bonding on that, I think is the correct thing, or on that. We have long enjoyed a 30-year bond on that, and I think the time may be for us to consider, because of especially development just across the city. You see, like, the average house now is almost $100,000 in just development impact fees to construct. And the ongoing impact that development is going to have as the city continues to increase in population and traffic. So I think one of the things that the city this council may want to have a presentation on sooner rather than later, because we're on the daily missing opportunities, is whether or not that bonding is appropriate for us and adequate for us moving forward. And that concludes my comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, you had something additional?
Yeah, and I know that when we're looking at this, we're looking at General City and then we're looking at the preserve. But Like, for example, I saw that they were talking about a 100,000 square foot industrial warehouse. So when we look at these fees, and I think we should be looking at potential development impact fees for the Pine Avenue connector and the Euclid connector, where we should charge some of these warehouses that we know are more than likely going to come in as a result of some surplus land acts that are coming from the state
Good
prison.
point, Mark.
And be able to start creating a diff fund to charge those developments that are coming in the future, so that when they do come in, we know that those trucks are going to have impacts in those areas, and we need to start collecting some money for that, because we're going to need to fund it somehow. And it's time that some of these warehouse and industries start paying for it. So if we're going to look at an impact fee, I think that's something that we need to look at, especially at some of these massive warehouses that we have potentially coming in. Or
Sure. And we can add a land use category for warehousing separate from it, like differentiate between industrial and, light industrial manufacturing type uses versus warehouse uses that potentially generate more trips and add more congestion. We can add that to the fee schedule so you can capture those impacts separately.
Okay. Any other council comments? Okay, I'm going to go through mine, try to do it pretty quickly. I have notes all over the place. I do have one question that triggered on the slide. Preparatory actions required for DIF update. Under the fee methodology update, there's a comment added, alternative storm drain fee calculation based on impervious area. But we have storm drain retention areas now that are required on development, right? Don't we still have that requirement?
We do, but that's for water quality purposes.
Right.
So it's meant to capture a certain storm event that's smaller. It's for like a 2-year event versus our storm drains. They're meant to capture like a 100-year storm. So it's kind of not.
But you're only calculating it on the impervious area, which is the built area, right?
Right, so the larger the impervious area, the more runoff is gonna come off the site. So that's why we wanted to have this alternative fee, because there's some projects
That are
where
huge.
they're huge, they have a lot of, let's say, parking space, but they have very minimal building structures. And so it's appropriate that they would pay a higher fee
Okay.
in that case.
Even though there might be a lot of land and a lot of runoff from the land, they may pay you if the building is relatively small. Like I'm thinking about the new development now that's going on Pine and Euclid, the southeast corner. There's a huge area that's not going to be built on compared to what can be built because it's under the 566 stake line.
Right.
So there'll be all of that land that's going to have runoff, but you're only going to calculate the fee on the actual part that's being built.
Correct.
So what's going to mitigate all of the runoff from all of that huge piece of property?
Well, it would be that runoff is existing, so what's existing,
So it's historical?
it's historical, basically, yeah.
All right. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, possibly.
But wouldn't we have more runoff as a result of the asphalt
Yes,
that's going to be there as opposed to just the dirt that was there before?
depends on the slope of the land. Oh, quit huffing. We'll get done pretty soon.
I'm sorry, I'm not huffing for that.
You're huffing. Stop it. Oh. Let's see. Sorry. Can we maybe get copies of the slide presentations before the actual meeting next time? Okay, let me get back to this. Okay. On the Wildan report on its page 14, the council packet, page 21, under land use types, where you're talking about single-family residential, the fees are calculated on a per square foot of living space. What about garages?
The correlation for demand comes from people. So we correlate demand and we identify the average residence per unit. So the garage space is sort of considered ancillary, but the fee is levied on where the demand comes from, and that's where the people live. So it's based on the living space of the unit.
So there's no fees calculated on garages at all?
Correct. Yeah, we assume that a larger garage doesn't add additional demand for facilities.
No, I understand. I just wondered if we were trying to add more fees on a thing that's not habitable.
Right. Yeah. No. There are some jurisdictions that charge it on the total space of the building, including garages. You just need to be consistent whether or not you're charging the fee on the whole space or just the living space. But we feel it's most appropriate to constrain it to the living space because, again, that's where people are housed and that's where the demand comes from.
Okay. Now, I know we don't charge the school fees. I know the school district does. But the school district's fees, are they based on habitable space, or is it total building, including garages? Do you know?
I don't know. I would assume habitable space, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Can you find out and let me know?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, fire, on your page 26, ours 33, we talk about fire suppression facility impact fees for new development. And then on the next page, we talk about land acquisition for mid-preserve area station and a new fire station in the mid-preserve area. That is the only new fire facility that we're anticipating?
Yeah, that's the only new fire station. I believe this list, there's an expansion to the fire station 65, so adding square footage there.
That's Ramona, right? Ramona Avenue? Linda, 65 is Ramona Avenue?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but aside from that, you're correct. Those are the only sort of bricks and mortar that are assumed here. There are new engines and ancillary trucks and things of that nature. I believe this list was reviewed by the fire district, and that's what they had identified as needed to serve the city.
Okay. We don't have anything calculated in here for police, do we?
There's a law enforcement fee.
Okay, but isn't Lewis supposed to provide us some type of substation?
We are working with Lewis on a substation. We don't have all the final details, but we are working on that.
Okay, but that's separate from...
Separate from that diff fee, yes.
Okay.
We did include one project for the outfitting and furniture and fixtures for that facility, though. We just added it.
Okay.
And that's on page 23 of the draft study.
Oh, okay. And then, I think my last one. Under planned general facilities, we're including public works. And I know we talked about it earlier, we're gonna try to work a public-private partnership for a new city hall. But shouldn't we have something in there to help our share of costs when we relocate City Hall and rebuild the senior center and stuff like that? Or are we strictly gonna try to do it with public-private partnerships?
Well, that's our goal. We didn't include any of those facilities for the master plan, right?
Any kind of expansion.
But that makes sense, Mayor, because what if we can't?
Well,
What
and
if we
that's my
can't
point.
make that happen? Yeah.
And then like we want to add on to the Carolyn Owens building, that's not going to be a public-private partnership. And we need to do that. So we need a fee. We need income in order to do some of these things that we know are not going to be covered by a partnership. So I think we have a gaping hole here that we're not addressing.
Okay.
And we're not going to revisit these fees for another, what, 8 years?
So the public use facilities fee was pulled out of the update for now. We're bringing that back in September. So we haven't finalized the cost in the list, so we're going to provide that in September when we come back. So
Well,
that would include any expansion to citywide facilities such as Carolyn Owens, the Preserve Community Center, and such.
I would suggest that we look at that. I mean, we need to at least address best, worst-case facility. Okay, I mean, it's pie in the sky. We hope to get these partnerships, but if we don't, that means we're not going to be able to improve. Also, we don't have, in these fees, there's no kind of cost escalator at all based on CPI or anything, is there?
Oh, yes. So we actually provided new cost estimates in the study, so everything has brand-new pricing, and then we do the annual escalator when we bring it back annually.
Okay. Now, I have one last question, and that is park upgrades. When we look at what it cost us to do Rancho Park, and I know that was exceptional because it was ADA and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But, so it was it was a lot more expensive than a normal park. But when I was looking at the fees for development, I think it's really woefully short when we look at just what it costs to improve a park now, just to replace the playground equipment and stuff, not even starting from scratch. And we're looking at building brand-new parks. I think we're going to be underfeed, you know what I mean, underfunded.
Well, I will mention that, and Sylvia alluded to this earlier in the presentation, that the park cost improvement in the prior program was calculated as a multiplier of the land value, which isn't necessarily analogous to what it costs to build a park. So in this update, we took a look at some other local jurisdictions and got some fresh park costs and took the average cost per acre. It has increased to about 1.165 million per acre. I will say that recently, in the last week or so, we did get a comparable park cost from the city of Ontario, and they're also updating their Nexus study right now, and we're going to add that to the sample to make sure that we include the most accurate park construction costs going forward. But that is certainly something that we looked at, and it's a more sound methodology to take a look at comparables as opposed to just a multiplier based on the cost per acre, because that was ending up with a situation where the park improvement cost was different for the preserve versus the general city when it costs the same to build a park regardless of where you are in the city.
Well, and a lot of it has to do with how much open space you have as well. Like Rancho Park was tiny. It was only about an acre, but it was like, what, $5 or $6 million?
Yeah.
Well, if you have a huge park with a lot of open space, obviously the development cost is going to be less than one that's concentrated like Rancho Park. So
Right.
I don't know how in the world you would put something like that into a calculation, but it seems like there somehow needs to be a nexus in the size of the park.
Yeah, well, we'll take another look at the park construction cost per acre. We want to make sure that we come up with a representative cost that reflects the types of amenities that you're building here as well. So we could take another look at that and make sure that it's right-sized for the types of parks that you're building, and certainly consider the city's recent experience, but also what other people are paying for parks. And I think your point is well taken, that sometimes the scale of the park affects the costs. Sometimes those tiny little neighborhood pocket parks cost the most on a per acre basis just because you're jamming so many amenities into a small space.
Right.
So we'll take a look at that. And one approach might be to kind of weight the cost per acre by the different types of parks that you might be building. So we're happy to take a look and make sure that the assumption that we have for park improvement cost per acre is reflective of the types of things you're going to be building going forward.
There has to be an assumption based off of the programming of the park, whether it's passive or active, so.
Right.
So I'm sure there's a way to do that. Yeah, the amenities.
Okay, council have any other questions or comments? Okay, is there anyone from the audience that would like to address the council on this item? Stubby?
Good afternoon. I just want to second the motion for the toll road. I think that is ideal. Actually, I was thinking about that after you said that. That's why toll roads are built, because people in areas don't cooperate to build them, so they build. That's the same thing that happened like on the 91 toll road things. So, just something that struck me. So we're looking at anticipated revenue by charging these fees, but we're charging the fees now on square footages. Fine, except I believe the square footage was 3,300 without a garage for a house, which seems high, and 1,400 for multifamily, which also seems high. So then we're making a projection that we may fail to achieve. Where previously we were doing it per unit. If they built an 800 square foot apartment or a 1,500 square foot apartment, we got the same diff fees. So it's just something to consider, because we're basically projecting the income. And in the past, with the exception of that $9 million we collected for the street light over there in Ontario, we have all traditionally fallen short with our DF fees. By the way, if you just want to read the history, some of the traffic studies that were done in like 2003, 2004 for the preserve, they had outlying impacts on intersections that I couldn't even find on a map. I read them one time. And I think that's where a lot of this money has come from. We collected the money. We can't spend it in Chino because that's illegal. We definitely don't want to give it back. So anyway, I think the square footage might affect the total fees that we collect. So thank you.
Thank you, Stubby. Anyone else? Okay, then with that, we will adjourn to a regular meeting, which will be held on June the 16th at 6, with closed session starting no earlier than 4. With that, we are adjourned.